morning and welcome to this morning's webinar as part of Health and Safety Month 2021. Great to be back here this morning. My name is Kate Mihiris and I am the Head of Regulated Industries here in Health and Safety at WorkSafe Victoria, and really proud to be hosting this morning's webinar, which is all about Silica. So specifically new regulations, health updates, and what controls are best for your business. So while our program of sessions this year is virtual, much like last year, we have the same intentions, which is to keep you up to date and across all that you need to know about health and safety in your workplace. Our theme this year is you learn something new every day. And this morning you'll hear about something new on the horizon in regards to Silica. In particular, what this session is going to outline is the forthcoming amendments of the OHS regulations that will actually introduce a licensing scheme for workshops processing engineered stone. As well as those new obligations for those workshops, this also covers suppliers of engineered stone. We're going to also cover prevention and early diagnosis, and we'll hear from a qualified doctor this morning all about that. And we're going to talk about the different types of silicosis and how serious this illness is and the importance of this morning's webinar. We're also going to meet someone from our Silica field team, 1 year on from that team being created, and we're going to hear about what they're all about and what they do day to day. So let me introduce this morning's speakers. I'm going to start with Dr. Ryan Hoy, who is a respiratory physician at Monash University and Alfred Health. Good morning, Dr. Hoy.
Morning, Kate.
Great to have you here. And Brian Monk, who is the Manager of Legislative Service and Reform at WorkSafe Victoria. Morning, Brian.
Morning, Kate. Morning, everyone.
Great to have you here too. And finally, Meryl Ashton, who is the group leader of the Silica field team that I mentioned just before. Good morning, Meryl.
Hi, Kate. Hi, guys.
Okay, so let's get into it. I'll start with a bit of background and context. Engineered and natural stone is used for items like benchtops, and this may contain quartz, a form of crystalline silica. Cutting, grinding, and abrasive polishing of natural or engineered stone generates respirable crystalline silica, which puts workers' health at risk. Engineered stone benchtops have a very high crystalline silica content. This is up to 95%. So prevention in the workplace is absolutely vital. Our first guest is Dr. Ryan Hoy, a respiratory physician with a master's degree in occupational and environmental health. Ryan was also a member of the National Dust Disease Task Force, which recently completed its independent review of the systems in place for the prevention, early identification, control and management of accelerated silicosis from engineered stone and broader occupational dust diseases. So, Ryan, I'm asking you first, can you explain to us just what is silicosis? And I understand there's some different types that you can talk to us about.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And I think it's a really important starting point to talk about the terminology that we use, because it is confusing and it is a bit problematic, a lot of the terms that we use. So I put together just a few slides. So it's good to just differentiate what we're talking about. So silica is naturally occurring minerals. So, a lot of the Earth's crust is made out of silica. It's the main component of sand that you walk on at the beach. And obviously in that form, it's not going to cause disease. The problem is when we inhale tiny, tiny particles of silica deep into the lungs. And by tiny, I'm talking about 1/10 the size of a human hair. So really small, about the size of a small dust particle, or even a pollen particle in the air. And these are particles that will float in the air. And so silicosis is a scarring disease of the lungs caused by inhaling those particles deep into the lungs. The lungs then react to those particles and cause scar tissue formation. So the reason why somebody gets silicosis is because of the amount of silica that they inhale at work. If we just go to the next slide, because again, as I say, the terminology that we use here is a bit confusing, and we use terms like chronic or accelerated silicosis really based on factors such as the duration of exposure to silica dust. So, the cutoff we have for chronic silicosis is if somebody's been exposed for over 10 years. If it's been less than 10 years, we talk about accelerated silicosis. Simple silicosis is something else that people would have heard of, and that's when you've got really small spots in the lungs, these small nodules that are less than 10 millimetres in size. when they get bigger or start grouping together over 10 millimeters, then that's what we call complicated silicosis. So again, a lot of it's quite arbitrary, the different terms that are used. If we just go to the next slide, I think this is actually a little bit more helpful because it just shows you the range of severity of silicosis that we see. And often when I talk to my patients, we talk about sort of the degree of severity of silicosis from sort of 1 through to 10. And you can see, the worker in 1 here with simple silicosis, at the top of their CT scan, just a few really, really minor little spots there. And, even though it's very minor, that's still consistent with silicosis. And then the second one has a lot more of those spots through the lungs, but still it's simple silicosis. And then unfortunately, the third worker has much more advanced disease with these larger white masses in the lungs, which is a more advanced form of silicosis or complicated silicosis. And just in the next slide, I'm talking a little bit here about some of the symptoms that silicosis can cause. And a lot of the time, and really the majority of the time, actually has no symptoms at the early stages of disease. And that's where health screening, health monitoring is so important, because you may not have any symptoms to actually demonstrate there's actually a problem. But as the disease develops, then developing breathing trouble, cough, wheeze, tiredness. There can be sort of non-specific symptoms, even like chest pain and weight loss. So quite a range of symptoms that can be associated with silicosis.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hoy. Quite a succinct summary, but some really important messages there. I guess, can I just pick up on talking about the diagnosis? And you also mentioned monitoring, I think. What's the best way to seek a diagnosis? And then when we look at workplaces, who should be undertaking that monitoring and that screening?
Yeah, so it's a really important issue because, first and foremost, screening needs to actually be done. And, that's certainly been a big problem that we've seen recently, especially in the stone benchtop industry, that there's been many, many years where health screening wasn't actually done, or if it was done, it wasn't done at the standard that was required. It was sort of, if it was done, it was almost like a tick and flick sort of exercise that, an employer may have sent workers to a well-meaning GP down the road, but that GP really wasn't well enough equipped to actually undertake that type of health monitoring. So the first thing is that an employer actually provides health screening, health monitoring for their employees. The second is that the screening really needs to be undertaken by a physician that's got expertise in undertaking this type of testing. So it needs to be an occupational physician or respiratory physician with expertise in occupational lung disease. Because these are complex assessments, and the outcomes can have a major impact on workers and the workplace. So the physician needs to understand how to take a full occupational history, what tests to order, how to interpret those tests. The presence of a couple of little spots on a CT scan in somebody that's had very minimal exposure to silica is very different to somebody that's been exposed for a few years. So how to actually then communicate that back to the worker, the employer, and then how that actually influences fitness to work as well. So these are complex assessments, and they do need to be done by a specialist that's got expertise in this area. We've recently very pleasantly opened the occupational respiratory clinic at the Alfred Hospital, and that's part of the service that we provide, as well as a multidisciplinary approach to health assessments, really building on the knowledge that we've gained over the last 2 or 3 years, especially of screening workers from the stone benchtop industry.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hoy. So I'm going to come to you now, Brian. I understand you've worked in a range of roles across WorkSafe regarding the implementation of the Victorian Government Silica Action Plan since its announcement in early 2019. So we understand there are new regulations on the way, and they're going to come into effect shortly. Can you tell us a little bit about why these regulations are being introduced, and also what the key changes are that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. As many people would be aware, WorkSafe amended the OHS regulations in 2019 to specifically prohibit the uncontrolled dry cutting and grinding polishing of engineered stone. This was a very targeted regulation addressing a particular product and processes that were causing enormous harm to workers. After that was introduced, we reviewed the OHS regulations as they apply to engineered stone, as well as crystalline silica in other products and industries. These regulations are being introduced to address a number of issues in the existing regulations that we discovered, and that includes a lack of information across the supply chain about crystalline silica and products. We're finding that a lot of businesses and workers just don't know that they're working with crystalline silica a lot of the time. There's uncertainty about appropriate controls that should be in place for certain processes. The stonemason industry in particular is quite decentralised, a lot of small business and sole traders, so there was not necessarily a clear picture of who was working with engineered stone across the state. And outside of engineered stone, there's a huge variety of crystalline silica products and processes out there across a number of industries in manufacturing, construction, earth resources, as well as the stonemason industry. And so the key changes that we're introducing in these regulations can really be split between engineered stone focused regulations and then, non-engineered stone or other crystalline silica regulations. This is in recognition of the specific harm that has been caused by engineered stone processes, but also acknowledging the widespread presence of crystalline silica and that potential for harm across many other industries as well. For engineered stone, we're introducing a licensing scheme, as well as an expanded set of specific controls that must be implemented when working with engineered stone. The effect of requiring a license is that businesses who undertake engineered stone processes will need to be assessed by WorkSafe as being suitable to undertake that, and show that they're protecting their workers when asking them to do those tasks. For all other processes that generate crystalline silica dust across industries, there are prescribed hazard control documents that need to be produced and maintained, similar to a safe work method statement or SWMS in high-risk construction work. And then for all products, including engineered stone that contain crystalline silica, there are new supplier and manufacturer obligations that will need to be met that go to ensuring other businesses that are being supplied to are aware of what the product contains and the percentage of crystalline silica in there.
Thank you, Brian. Main changes there, and no doubt we'll get into a bit more detail shortly on those, but I'd like to now come to you, Meryl. Meryl, you've been an inspector at WorkSafe for 20 years, and currently you are the group leader of the dedicated silica field team at WorkSafe Victoria. So for the last 2 years, I understand your focus has been on conducting silica-related inspections into workplaces and working towards the silica intervention program and implementing that. Can you tell us, sort of in your own words, a little bit about your team and what you do?
Thanks, Kate, for sure. So the Silica team was established to focus on silica hazards. We targeted the stonemason industry as one of our focuses, and we are a team of dedicated inspectors. We've got technical inspectors, we've got a hygienist embedded in the team, and a project officer supporting us as well. We are a state-based team that does metro and regional visits as well, and our inspections are strategic project visits and also response inspections as well. The workplaces that we have visited over the last year have included stonemasons, construction workplaces, and other industries that use silica-based products and materials in their processes as well. The other work that our team also have done is we've been implementing and supporting the e-monitoring program to review the effectiveness of control measures at workplaces. As well, we've actively participated in the development of the crystalline silica regulations and the supporting guidance and documentation supporting that as well. As well, we've also actively promoted the WorkSafe Health Monitoring Program, and we're continuing to that also actively promote the Alfred Hospital program that Dr. Ryan Hoy was talking about as well.
Wow, that is a wealth of work. So, Meryl, can I stay with you though? And can you perhaps, I'm imagining there's a few workplaces listening today to the webinar. What advice would you have for workplaces, particularly how to reduce that risk of exposure to crystalline silica?
Yeah, for sure. As we all know, uncontrolled dry cutting is banned in Victoria. So workplaces need to control the exposure to respirable crystalline silica by implementing the hierarchy of control. So the hierarchy of control looks at the highest order first. So we look at, can you use material that doesn't contain crystalline silica at all, where possible. Then look at, if you can't, look at whether you can find a product that has lower crystalline silica content as well. Then from that, looking at automated machinery. So that will do the cutting, grinding and polishing of the engineered stone. So eliminating a person doing that job, but a piece of machine doing that. If that is unable to be done, using handheld tools or mechanical plant with integrated water delivery system, such as water suppression to suppress the dust. The other control measures can be used is on-tool dust extraction, such as a H-class vacuum cleaner, which can be used in the stonemason industry, or an M-class vacuum cleaner within the construction industry. Other things to look at is also implementing good housekeeping and cleaning practices to reduce that secondary exposure, which can happen during these tasks as well. Admin controls can also be implemented to support those the higher order control measures, such as job rotation, looking at your workplace layout, looking at your practices that you're doing, and also providing information, instruction and training to those employees in relation to who are working with engineered stone. And of course, providing employees with the appropriate PPE, the respiratory protection, while doing those tasks.
So, Meryl, can I just thank you for that? Can I just ask, though, Brian just talked about some future changes to the regulations on the way in the future. What else should workplaces be thinking about right now? If they've already done all those things, what's on the horizon for them to really be focused on?
For sure. So absolutely, all the current control measures or current obligations will still be in place. However, there will be additional ones that will come into play. So those will look at where you've got recycled or recirculated water where you're using. You need to make sure that it's been adequately treated. The other thing with that is with control measures now, you need to make sure if they're designed, installed and used and maintained, they are going to eliminate the exposure to crystalline silica as well. As well, must provide PPE, respiratory protection to your employees as well. As well, one of the future changes will be is that you need to provide information to future job applicants on the risks associated with the exposure to crystalline silica as well. As well, there will be specific cleaning requirements in relation to the use of compressed air or gases at the workplace as well. As well, like Brian said before, you need to have an engineered stone control plan prepared and in place. So that, like Brian said before, it's like a swim. So it's you need to identify the work that's been undertaken, state the hazards and the risks associated with the work, and describe how the risk measures will be implemented. One of the other extra obligations that will come in play as well is there'll be extra obligations in relation to providing health monitoring and air monitoring reports to WorkSafe in the future as well.
Okay, no doubt some more information to come our way on those. So, Brian, can I come back to you to just ask some more questions around those new regulations? When, for employers and self-employed persons who have those obligations, when will they need to? Is there a transition period in place here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start by saying there will, of course, be plenty of information and guidance to industry in relation to these changes, including templates of some of those documents that Meryl was talking about there. So that will be all available. There will also be transition periods for both the engineered stone focused regulations as well as the other crystalline silica products and processes, the regulations that deal with those. Employers and self-employed persons undertake engineered stone processes will need to apply for an engineered stone licence from WorkSafe. We expect those regulations to be made subject to government decision by 15th of November this year. And from that date, businesses will be able to apply for an engineered stone licence. That will be able to be done through the WorkSafe licensing portal. There'll be plenty of information about how to do that, as well as guides on what's needed to make that application. There'll be a 12-month transition period from that date before a licence will be required to carry out engineered stone processes. So 12 months from November this year to apply and be approved by WorkSafe for that engineered stone licence. For the high-risk crystalline silica work regulations, those will commence in 6 months' time from the making of the regulations. So in May 2022, the requirement to have a SWIMS or a control statement in place for those crystalline silica processes will be in effect. The manufacturing and supply duties also commence on that date in May. So there's time for those businesses to update their either SDSs or other information that they provide businesses to ensure that they're compliant with those new regulations. Again, plenty of information available will be made available to those once the regulations are made, and that'll be on our website, and advisory will also have those details.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and we'll provide details to that shortly. So, Meryl, can I just come back to you, though, with all of these changes on the horizon, will your team be looking for anything different in workplace inspections?
Well, of course, we'll be undertaking, our team will be undertaking inspections to review compliance under these existing regulations, OHS Act, and within line with the new proposed regulations as well. And we will continue to review the control measures that need to be in place as well. So during those inspections, we'll provide guidance and information to not only to the employer, but to the employees as well on how they can meet their obligations and ensure they are working safely with engineered stone. However, if we do identify issues during these inspections, we may issue improvement notices or give direction to a duty holder to rectify these issues, and we'll give them a timeframe to make sure those are rectified in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you, Meryl. So I'm going to come back to you now, Dr. Hoy. I've forgotten about you. Silicosis is a really horrible disease, and it may not appear, I think you alluded to this, for many years after that exposure. So in your words, why is workplace prevention and early diagnosis so important?
Yeah, no, it's a really important issue. So essentially, this is a lung disease that's been caused specifically by an occupational exposure. So, no worker deserves to develop a lung disease just because they've gone to work and gone about their tasks of work. So, it's been it's been a huge tragedy to actually see this re-emergence of silicosis. This is a disease that we've seen over the years increase and then decrease and then come back time and time again. And it just shows how widespread silica is in industry, whether it's in engineered stone or concrete or other areas. So there just needs to be ongoing vigilance in terms of actually identifying the use of silica and then controlling dust, which can be generated from those silica-containing materials. So silicosis, it's quite varied in terms of how it presents and how it can actually affect a worker. And what we've found, certainly our experience here in Australia and internationally, has been that the earlier it's actually identified and at the milder sort of stage has been identified, the fewer symptoms that it actually causes. And what we're really hoping and what we've seen so far is that those early identified cases with really mild disease have quite a steady sort of progress, meaning that they don't seem to be progressing at this point. So we haven't seen significant deterioration. But what we have seen is people who have been diagnosed at a later stage are progressing much more quickly. And so that really comes back to that sort of early diagnosis and screening when somebody is asymptomatic. And, unfortunately, there is, but understandably, anxiety about having health screening performed because maybe you've seen a friend that's been diagnosed with silicosis and the impact that's had on them. But I really encourage people to come forward and go through health screening, and certainly going to be a requirement for employers to ensure that that's being done at the appropriate standard. But really, as I say, early treatment, early identification, and really then specialist treatment when somebody is diagnosed with silicosis, that they're under the care of a specialist physician that knows how to treat this condition, identify other factors that may be influencing their disease, like smoking, etc. There may be other factors that need to be addressed apart from the silicosis itself. So, I think, again, the first thing that needs to be done is actually going forward and actually having the screening done in the first place.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Hoy. So, Meryl, can I come back to you? I mean, all three of you have covered a lot of information today, and we'll have people probably seeking more information. We know that WorkSafe have a lot of good quality things on the website around engineered stone and crystalline silica. Where would you recommend people go to find more about their responsibilities and, importantly, how to make their workplace safer?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we know, WorkSafe have a dedicated website. So information is available not just for employers, but for self-employed persons, employees, health and safety reps. So you can find information on our website, which is www.worksafe.vic.gov.au, or you can actually go to our dedicated crystalline silica landing page, which is www.worksafe.vic.gov/crystalline silica. As Brian said, as you get closer to the regs, there'll be additional information provided supporting what information is provided for a stonemason and getting their engineered stone license. There'll be additional guidance material and templates provided. As we know, information is not just in English. You can actually get that information in Italian, Chinese and Vietnamese to support other industries where English is not their main language. Or you can call the advisory line as well and talk to a dedicated person in relation to silica matters or other health and safety matters on 1-800-136-089. And just in line with what Ryan Hoy was saying about making sure you go to the Alfred Hospital, you can call up the advisory line on that same number that I've just given, and you can get additional information and determine whether you're eligible to go through the Alfred Hospital for that to get the health assessment done. So just by calling the 1-800-136-089.
So in regards to testing and scans on employees? This might go with you, Dr. Hoy. The question is, how often would you recommend testing and scans on employees? Is there some guidance there?
Yeah, so what we've learnt over the last couple of years is that unfortunately it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this, and this is really the crux of why the health monitoring needs to be performed by an occupational physician or a respiratory physician with expertise in this area. We need to take into account quite a few issues in terms of the longitudinal follow-up that these workers have. For example, somebody that's been in the stone benchtop industry for the last 6 months and never been working in an environment where there's been any dry processing is going to need different follow-up to somebody that's been working in the industry for 10 years and had 6 years of work in a very dusty environment. So, I'd love to say that there is, just a recipe to follow and, that's what you do. But unfortunately, there's not at the moment. What we're generally advising is that a worker would have lung function testing, which is called spirometry and gas transfer, being done essentially on a yearly basis. And that's also an opportunity to touch in with the doctor that's doing the health screening, assess symptoms at that time as well. And then radiological monitoring, which would either be a CT scan or a chest X-ray, potentially every 2 to 5 years. We always have to take into account radiation exposure, especially with CT imaging. So, that's one of the reasons why we can't be sort of hard and fast. But we are in the process of also developing some nationally consistent guidance in this area too. But again, it's been complex, so we haven't quite got to, a standard, around Australia sort of approach to it just yet. But we were certainly getting very close to that.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a really important message to wrap up today's webinar on. So thank you, Meryl, Brian, and Dr. Hoy. This is where I say farewell to you guys today. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And this is where I'm going to wrap up today's webinar as well. So you've already heard there's a lot of great resources and tools that can assist you, and it's available via our website, or you can also call our advisory line if you have any questions. WorkSafe is helping to ensure Victorian workers are supported to get through these particularly tough times right now in the COVID pandemic. If you work with engineered stone, make sure you're aware of the new regulations and what they mean for you. You've heard from our fantastic panel today, covering a wealth of information about what you need to know about silica. We hope that you found this interesting and informative. Remember, if there's something urgent that you'd like to discuss that you've heard about today or another issue in your workplace, you can call our advisory line, both during business hours and after hours as well for an emergency. On the screen shortly, there'll be a list of key points and contacts that we talked about today that you might find of interest to you that you'd like to follow up later. And if you have any requests for further information, as I said, please do not hesitate to reach out and get in touch. We heard from Meryl today about the phone numbers and the websites that you can go to get the information you need. So I'll say farewell now. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.